and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Dion, and today we are going to be talking about the allure of being sort of unpalatable. How different TikTok trends and just trends in general have been sort of skewing towards women and feminine presenting people not catering to men and what men want, and in fact going so far as rejecting what men want in appearances. So if you like discussion about fashion and trends, definitely subscribe down below. And with that, let's get into it. As a chronically online person, I've had my hands on the pulse of many different trends, and one that I've been seeing, especially in the past couple of years, is this rise of feminine rage, the dark femininity, femcel core, being a femcel, rejecting the male gaze, no longer presenting yourself in the male gaze. I sort of see it as a way of women like taking back their power. Women are criticized for everything: being too thin, too thick, not curvy enough, dressing too feminine, not dressing feminine enough, too slutty, too modest. Like, it doesn't matter. So many women feel like they can't do anything right. In my case, I posted the other day on my Instagram story, normalize being a bitch, because after so much discourse and trying to advocate for myself as a professional creative in some ways, and negotiating with businesses, I was getting feedback that I was coming off a little strong. And this has been a theme throughout my entire life, where I feel like I cannot stand up for myself and express myself without people thinking that I'm a bitch. I even had my mom proofread messages that I was gonna send to these people to make sure that I sounded nice enough, polite enough. Everybody knows, like, you put in exclamation points and smiley faces to soften the blow when you're sending emails, especially as a woman, or else because you don't want to come off rude, and it's like so annoying. But it felt like no matter how demure I was, no matter how polite I was, no matter how many times I proofread those messages, I was still coming off as a bitch. And so I just was like, you know what? Normalize being a bitch. Like, normalize just standing up for yourself and advocating for yourself. And if that gets you called a bitch, like, whatever. Model Emily Ratajkowski shared a similar sentiment.
What era do you think is after the bad bitch era?
No, I think I'm just going to be in my bitch era forever. Period.
And TikTok users everywhere are self-proclaiming proud femcels and female manipulators and men repellent. Mina Lay made a video about the mental health effects of toxic femininity and femcel culture, and Alice Capel discussed the power of female rage when directed towards organizing, empowering, and advocating. In this video, I'm going to explore the commonality that the femcel core trend, the rise of female rage, and the rejection of the male gaze have in the protection that becoming unpalatable can assert. First, I want to explain some terms. I'm going to say like women or femmes, FEMs. I just like mean anybody that basically relates to what I'm talking about. Female presenting, because I'm female at birth. But like, if you resonate with the experiences of what I'm talking about, then this is for you. For shortening reasons, I'm just gonna say like femmes or women in a lot of this video. For femcel, there's a lot of different iterations of femcel. There's sort of the very literal like subreddit misandrist, like female incel side of it, and then there's like femcel core, the like TikTok, Pinterest side of it. And so to define it, I'm gonna use this Vice article titled, "What is a femcel?" The social media femcels of today use the term less as an indicator of how much sex they're unable to have, and more as a way to express their personality traits that are perceived as pathetic or manipulative or toxic in some way. They do so unapologetically, romanticizing these stereotypical female traits in the process. When we talk about female rage, we see those like images of women screaming and crying and being messy and unhinged, and Midsummer and Angelina Jolie and Lana Del Rey, you know, that whole vibe. And though that may seem very romantic and alluring to some people, others see feminine rage as a tool for change. I really enjoy this piece from the Pit News by Anna Fisher titled, "It's Time to Embrace Female Rage." And I'm gonna use a couple of quotes to define what I'm talking about in this video when it comes to female rage. All of these terms and topics are so like abstract that like nothing is a concrete definition. Anyway, Fisher says, Society has disrespected female rage. Emotions of anger that are perceived as powerful and authoritative in men have been deemed unnatural in women. When a woman is angry, she is asked if she's on her period or if she needs chocolate, and above all, she gets told to calm down. The epitome of the ridicule of feminine rage is the angry black woman stereotype, which twists and demonizes valid anger towards oppression in black women into a hostile and aggressive caricature of legitimate feelings of frustration. She continues in the article, anger is a natural emotion for all people, not just those with testicles. Never let anyone invalidate your rage. Use it for change, use it for good. Anger is powerful, and that's why the patriarchy has tried to suppress it for centuries. And to be clear, I'm not advocating for violence. I know that some people have really punchable faces, but physical violence won't solve systematic oppression. Feel that anger, then use it to protest and encourage people to vote. If after that you still feel the need to punch something, join a boxing class. And I feel like the last part is really important. Alice Capel does go more into that in her video. But that just sort of reducing and boiling down female rage to this one archetype, this one aesthetic, when it's really like a powerful wave and something that's been so often suppressed and minimized, and or at least tried to be minimized by society, to reduce it to a mood board when it really could be used to enact a lot of change, which we'll get into later. When we talk about rejecting the male gaze, I want to put in this clip of a Fox News correspondent talking about college students.
And last, college doesn't look like it's fun anymore.
Right.
I mean, have you seen a lot of how miserable looking a lot of the students are? They're deliberately like uglifying themselves. You see them on TikTok.
Wow.
They're out of shape. They're asexual. They're rejecting the truth and beauty. They all look like rejects from a loony bin. I'd steer clear of college too.
The reason why I chose this clip, it really shows a sentiment of what so many college students feel in response to this clip, which is, we're not dressing for you. We're not trying to impress you. You're assuming that, but we're not. In fact, I'm dressing purposefully so people like you, men like you, won't want to be near me, won't be attracted to me, won't, and that's the point. And so this is actually a compliment that you are disgusted by me because I achieved my goal. And I feel like a lot of countercultures have embraced this tool. I feel like you see it a lot in sort of the punk movement in the early 80s and stuff, of just like, I'm gonna give off a don't fuck with me vibe, subvert what is typical in femininity, especially with like female punks and female like grunge rockers and stuff, just really subverting that traditional look of femininity. The male gaze is a feminist theory claiming that society is viewed through the prism of the masculine heterosexual perspective, with men constantly objectifying women, often seeing them only as sex objects. The female gaze is a way that women are portrayed through the eyes of a woman instead of a man. Through the eyes of a woman, women are seen as people with feelings and intelligence. The focus isn't necessarily on what the eye can see, but on what the heart can feel. The female gaze looks to evoke emotions and feelings, focusing on touch, interactions, and atmosphere instead of action and just sexuality. The female gaze looks to balance the man and the woman, making them equals in all areas. Outside of film, the female gaze in the fashion world is to stop dressing for men and what men want in how women dress, but start dressing for what women value and what women like, what women would appreciate. And again, this is typically used in like a film or art context, not in a context for people's actual lives living through the male or female gaze. We'll get into it. Women are tapping into the power of being unpalatable, not only to release themselves from the male gaze, but to actively reject male standards, in some cases purposely unsettle men as a way to break the chains and boxes that society places on them. First, we're going to delve into femcel core a little bit. One big part of femcel core is the female incel. Incel means involuntary celibate. Now, incels have been labeled as a terrorist group and have actually gone out and killed women. And yes, some fringe groups of femcels do have a heavy dosage of aggression and misandry. The majority of self-proclaimed femcels or femcel core is the aesthetification of being undateable, proudly displaying why you're a man's worst nightmare, romanticizing your problematic traits and why men wouldn't like you. Sarah D'Acuto wrote for the Global News, To some, being a femcel is to be loudly feminine, outrageous, and controversial online, or it's about posting memes and tweets inspired by movies like Gone Girls and musicians like Lana Del Rey. To others, being a femcel is a prison-like state of mind. It's focused on perceived lack of sexual and romantic experience makes the person different, less than the peers in their age group. The only true commonality among femcels seems to be the internet. On social media, femcels use sarcastic and self-deprecating humor to express upset at not meeting the conventional standards of female objectification. Whether it's a young woman claiming the femcel identity as a satirical social media trend, or another tweeting their genuine feelings of frustration into the digital void, there's an undeniable performance of identity among femcels. Edgy, crude, and usually chronically online, the femcel is unashamed of their own toxicity and has cultivated a powerful persona surrounding it. I have a little bit of a problem with like those last two sentences and sort of implying that femcels are only doing it for the performance, or a huge aspect of it is the performance. And maybe it is true. And I think this theme of women constantly being surveilled by themselves and others, and even like internally surveilling yourself, is a common theme in this video. But I don't know, the last two sentences didn't really sit right with me. But again, when I'm talking about femcels here, I'm really talking about femcel core, not the violent misandry side of being a femcel, but more of just the aesthetification of it. Prime examples of the aesthetic of femcel are anger issues, trauma in their adolescence or childhood, a lack of personal responsibility, substance abuse, and body image issues. If you were on Tumblr, then this may look a lot like the pale grunge, coquette, sad girl trend we saw in 2012-2014. Mina Lay actually did another great video on the romanticization of mental illness in men and women, but how women use it to express fragility, often were incentivized by stay in the ocean. As someone who was on Tumblr during these days, I will fully admit that I succumbed to the toxicity of the sort of pale grunge sad girl thing, reposting those videos of scars and emaciated bodies. And this is like so gross, the artfully pale and blue-skinned photos. I loved it. And even though I wasn't experiencing depression, I wasn't experiencing anything. I was like 14, 15. I hadn't really done anything in my adolescence or young adulthood. I found that these images and the sadness did make me more deep, did make me more interesting. I had a friend in middle school who loved John Keats and Elliott Smith for similar reasons and thought that consuming their art meant that she was more interesting because it was so tragic. There was something about the fragility and the attention and the softness that came with projecting an image of brokenness. Author Emily Rose Dunn wrote in her thesis, "Blue is the New Black: How Popular Culture is Romanticizing Mental Illness." The consequence of admiration towards mental illnesses are varied. On a lesser scale, it has shown in behaviors such as using disorders such as depression or anxiety as accessories to make one's personality more interesting. On a more critical scale, it may lead to the tendency to not seek out help if one is experiencing symptoms of poor mental health due to the weary opinions of the older generation suspicious of fakery for attention. On the flip side, overdiagnosis can also occur. There is nothing wrong with trying to humanize mental illness through depictions in film and social media. However, it needs to be done so more objectively, with realistic information and with the faded flower aesthetic removed. The faded flower aesthetic is a concept that was really common in sort of the like tuberculosis era of these women who were so pale and tired and fragile, and often women who were experiencing symptoms of tuberculosis were sent off to the seaside to be refreshed, to get some vitamin D and hopefully feel better. One very impactful TV show and piece of media that really exemplifies the manic pixie dream girl, the sad girl, the broken but hot, damaged but hot girl, Skins UK, specifically series 1 through 4. I have easily watched series 1 through 4 15 times, and that's a very conservative estimate. In early high school to mid high school, I was absolutely obsessed with it. Fun fact, this is actually so embarrassing. I was like, when I was like 13, I was a little bit bullied at the summer camp. They were like pulling pranks on me and stuff, and I stood up for myself, and the counselors saw me standing up for myself and thought that I was the one that was like being antagonistic. So it made my experience even worse. And so I ended up going to a different summer camp the next year, and I was so afraid of A, being bullied again, but B, standing up for myself, coming off as a bitch, as I said before, because I faced backlash last time I stood up for myself, that on the drive up, I was like, play the victim, don't stand up for yourself, like play the victim, just like always don't even try, just immediately like go and cry basically. And I wanted to seem more interesting. And so I was going to say, I was planning in my head that my middle name was Elizabeth. It's not. And that I go by Effie, which is a character from Skins, because I just wanted to see, I wanted her confidence, her allure, her edginess, it's just everything. She was so cool and toxic. And I just sort of wanted a dosage of her. And I did chicken out at the last minute, but sort of that longing to be somebody different, because I was so afraid to be someone different and someone that was so compelling yet really toxic and tragic. Like Effie's not a romantic, she's not a great character, but I'd rather be her, this victim, this mentally ill, won't get help sort of person, than like myself, because I was so afraid of just like being myself. So a little sad antidote, but I feel like a lot of people, especially young girls, can relate to wanting to be a little bit damaged in order to make yourself more interesting, and how Tumblr really exasperated this. But I mean, it's been going around for a while, and Skins definitely put it into media, this idea of like the hot damaged. Oh my god, I wanted to be Effie or Cassie so badly, and looking back I'm like, girl. And now I have depression and I take like mental illness medication, and I'm just like,
surprise, shawty!
Played yourself. Like, this is your fault. So now I want to go through the questions I asked on my Instagram about this topic. I always love having y'all's input into my videos, so definitely follow me on Instagram at @DionTheTaurus to be involved in other videos in the future. So when I asked, what are the pros of this new wave of feminine rage? It shows that women's emotions don't need to be convenient or helpful to be valid. It's brilliant. I think women are less likely to settle with a guy who doesn't treat them right. Women are able to show more emotion without feeling like they overreacted. It's a cool aesthetic, promoting emancipation and taking back power. And when I asked what the cons of this whole like femcel, female manipulator movement are, people said it glorifies toxic relationships and codependency. Men are somehow going to twist the concept to suit themselves, and they have. It's icky and not nice. Feminism is about equality, not misandry. It gives excuses to be rude for no reason. It reminds me of a worse version of 2014 Tumblr. It ignores the reality, and trauma and toxicity is only attractive to toxic people with trauma, nothing healthy about it. And it romanticizes toxicity, glamorizes smoking, mental health, violence, trauma, and anger issues. And then I asked, what's the deal with the romanticization of the damaged woman? People can emphasize with someone who's been hurt. Men like to have someone who needs saving. There's a hero aspect. There's something a man can save, protect, or take care of, or even take advantage of. Women shouldn't be told their suffering is okay because it's beautiful. It feels exploitative. I feel like nearly every woman is damaged, so we romanticize it. And in fact, I took a poll, like how many people agreed with that statement, and the majority of you guys did. Originally, I think the femcel movement was meant to show that they have flaws, which then people related, and now it kind of morphed into something else. And I said, like, what are your thoughts on this sort of trend of becoming unpalatable? Someone said, I used to sit and take like 100 pictures myself because I thought I looked ugly. I loved it. I agree with the idea of being unpalatable, but I don't think femcel, female manipulator, and the uglifying yourself overlap in all ways, which totally fair. I agree. I could be reaching. Somebody else says it feels spiteful. Another person used this analogy, which I think is really actually so wise. And she said it's like those caterpillars with the spikes to protect themselves and to sort of like keep danger off. It's sort of these aggressive perceptions, aggressive fronts that women are starting to put up, is allowing some sort of sense of like protection, I think, of escaping the male gaze. And maybe it probably does add some protection of just like, don't fuck with me. Another person said, I think you're grouping together a lot of things that don't make sense, which also totally fair. I will say, somebody mentioned that there is sort of like a white supremacy alt-right pipeline. And when I looked up femcel or femcel core on like TikTok, YouTube, Pinterest, got similar things. When I looked up female manipulator, similar things. When I looked up like male gaze, male repellent, similar things. When I looked up toxic femininity, it took a hard, far right. Hard far right. And I think this idea, it got into like, feminism isn't real and men are the victims kind of thing. Yeah. I feel like, unfortunately, so many, with the rise of like anti-Semitism and racism and misogyny, especially in the United States happening, and like kind of authoritarianism, these alt-right subgroups are just becoming like louder and louder. And the pipelines to alt-right have just been like permeating through so many different subcultures, even like the crunchy pipeline. So next we're gonna talk about, is unhinged rage helpful? Here's what this Freeze article had to say about that. Quote, I saw a woman in my local bakery wearing a t-shirt that said, "Rude bitches change the world." She was buying a loaf of rye sourdough and an oat milk latte, and her manner was notably pleasant. Around the same time as these signs appeared in my life, the model and writer Emily Ratajkowski declared on TikTok the beginning of her, quote, bitch era. It's easy for the pain of women to be fetishized, she argued, but what's less easy is to fetishize our anger. There's something about being told your anger is good because you're being of use that seems to circle back to the original problem of women not being afforded the space to live without constant justification. I don't want to have to be of use to be allowed to exist. And I think that's a main problem that a lot of people have with this whole female rage kind of movement, is that like, why is everything about putting women in a box, putting people in a genre, putting people in an archetype? So when it comes to being unpalatable, there have been times where I pick out outfits and clothing pieces that I know my boyfriend likes, or certain pants or shorts that I know that he likes. And there's other times where he looks at me and is like, I don't get your outfit. I don't get what's happening. And I'm like, it's not for you. This is for the girls. And I say like, I kind of like dressing a little ugly. Like I like grandma sweaters. I like these things that are a little bit subversive. I think it's funny. I think it's ironic. And I think it's, I don't know, I love it. In a lore about man repellent, according to the site, a man repeller is someone who outfits themselves in a sartorially offensive way that will result in repelling members of the opposite sex. Such outfit choices include, but are not limited to, drop waist pants, shoulder pads, turbans, and lots of animal print. Bowl cut wigs from the YSL 2008 runway show are definite man repellers. When it comes to makeup and hair, anything too over the top will turn off most guys. So what does this have to do with bleached brows? Over the past couple of years, especially in 2022, we've seen a rise in like the bleached brow trend from Kim Kardashian, Kendall Jenner, Doja Cat, Julia Fox. In this article about bleached brows in Glamour, brow artist Joey Healy says, in this world when we are trying to crawl out of the pandemic, people want to experiment with their looks and reinvent themselves with something fresh and new. It's also a very fashion-focused look. While it can be difficult to pull off, people are ready to take a bold stride and really step outside of the box. Chanel brow artist Jimena Garcia, in a Birdie article about the trend, points to Queen Elizabeth I, who plucked or shaved her brows into non-existence. It was a way of drawing away from the tension of femininity. History always repeats itself. In the era that we're in, we're really becoming gender neutral. It's like an hour and a half later because my camera battery died, so if the lighting looks different, shut up. Doja Cat has been a big proponent of her shaved head and no eyebrow look. And in an interview with Variety magazine, she said, "When I shaved my eyebrows off and shaved my head, I remember thinking, get the shit off me, because I needed to change something. I wasn't working out and wasn't really taking care of myself in the way that I wanted to. I was like, I need to do something. So I chopped it all off. And I could see the shape of my head. I could see my whole face. I can see my ears now that I don't have a wig that's glued to my forehead. I've been doing wigs for years and I haven't gotten used to it. You wake up in the morning and it's in your mouth and your eyes. It doesn't feel good. It's stressful if you want to work out, and then it slides off your head when you're in a public gym. Now you have another responsibility other than taking care of your body. So yeah, it's the best choice I've ever made. I've never felt more beautiful." Julia Fox shares a similar-ish opinion when it comes to her bleached brows. "Since I've bleached my brows, I get stopped on the street way less, and even though I fucking love you guys, I am enjoying this false sense of anonymity." Julia Fox has been rocking the bleached brow trend since May of this year, and she says she loves it because it acts as a man repellent. Quote, "They absolutely hate it. My son's father gets so triggered by these eyebrows, so that's why I continually do them." And there's like that allure of just like, I know this pisses you off and that's why I'm doing it. I feel like that allure of like stay away from me also kind of plays into the unhinged, like crazy trope that women play. It's like a form of protection, having all these signs of a man's worst nightmare. Is like, yeah, I am a man's worst nightmare. I do have bleached brows, so I'm glad that you want to stay away from me because that was my intention. The Freeze article from earlier states, quote, "It's also true that expressing anger for a woman is to risk attracting actual material violence. Many of us assume well-practiced expressions of impassivity when being harassed, because shouting back or even rolling our eyes invites the possibility of physical escalation. It's difficult to feel safe expressing anger, but it's also unpleasant, not only for others to experience, but for the person feeling it." This article from Mashable spoke about the male gaze, and they interviewed a few people, and I think this is really interesting. Quote, "The male gaze is a theory originating in film, but useful for interpreting art, photography, and literature in which the presumed camera/audience is male and everything in front of it is designed for his consumption, including women. It isn't something you can consciously or unconsciously dress for, and ascribing it to women and non-binary people's fashion choices doesn't make a whole lot of sense." They go on to talk about how often this idea of rejecting the male gaze plays into slut shaming. So it's like, oh, you're wearing tight clothes and showing off your boobs. I'm playing into the female gaze. That's so male gaze of you. Like, I don't do that anymore. That sort of superiority complex. It's not useful to shame, quote, dressing for the male gaze because it's insidious and inescapable, and ascribing value to female gaze good, male gaze bad won't solve anything. I think the, quote, POV you stop dressing for the male gaze trend was intended to show off the liberation that comes from ditching the male gaze when you stop trying to impress men with your appearance and start dressing for yourself. But we don't need to create this us versus them narrative, because really, male versus female gaze is only a useful tool in art and media. And that's why these hyper-curated personalities on social media can be so dangerous. We don't want to become a character outside ourselves, only to live for the performance and the perception of who you are. I hope that from this video you can see that the common thread that runs through these three separate trends, that there is power and liberation in being unpalatable. But I also hope you can see that we quickly put ourselves into new boxes of, quote, femcel, or only catering to the female gaze. My message on my channel is that clothing is fun, and I love niche aesthetics. It's a way to play dress up in a socially acceptable way, to pretend, to use imagination. Yes, there was something fun about pretending to be broken in my early teens for male validation, but the reality of mental illness sucks ass. I sort of live for the idea of purposely rejecting beauty standards that cater to men, but I'm not blind to the downside of the self-proclaimed femcel and the female manipulator aesthetic. And the whole point of feminism and women's liberation is to not be put in any boxes, belong to any gaze, to just exist as a woman, as an individual, not a character in somebody else's movie. Never let any aesthetic be the sole definition of who you are, no matter how much you're into it. Don't refuse the help you need for the Fleabag aesthetic. It's not worth it. Suffering and mental illness is not worth the aesthetic, and the aesthetic is not worth sacrificing other aspects of who you are. You're a complex person who deserves to live a life, not exist on a mood board. And I will leave you with this quote by Margaret Atwood. Male fantasies, is everything run by male fantasies? Up on a pedestal or down on your knees, it's all a male fantasy. That you're strong enough to take what they dish out, or else too weak to do anything about it. Even pretending you aren't catering to male fantasies is a male fantasy. Pretending you're unseen, pretending you have a life of your own, that you can wash your feet and comb hair unconscious of the ever-present watcher peering through the keyhole in your own head, if nowhere else. You are a woman with a man inside watching a woman. You are your own voyeur. Let me know what you think of that and everything else discussed in this video. It's got some heavy topics, so definitely take care of yourself. I appreciate you guys hearing me out, and I'd love to know what you think, so definitely comment down below and subscribe to my channel because I post videos every Thursday. And follow me on TikTok and Instagram because I love having you guys interact with me over there and discussing the new topics. And remember that you are not a slave to the aesthetic. You are not only the aesthetic. You don't have to curate your personality to be palatable and acceptable. Just be yourself. Fashion is fun. Bye, guys.